Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sportsbook Confidential. My name is John Sullivan, and I'm coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. And this little show is to help you learn and grow as a sports bettor. And today we have an interesting show for you. We're going to do a book review today. I'm in search of the best sports betting books out there, and I know some are better than others, but you can find a lot of real cheap secondhand books on the topic, and I'm going to go over one of those today. We're going to do Friday Night NHL as we usually do this time of year, and we're going to do XFL Week 4 of 10, and the NASCAR series is in California this weekend, and we'll talk about that race as well. But before we do any of that, let's do what we always do and update my bankroll and see how we did last week. And took a little step back. Starting bankroll, $529. Friday night, we had the Oilers over, and that was a winner, easy winner for us, plus $19 to the bankroll. And then we had the Avalanche, minus 1.5 goals, and that was a loser. They only won by 1, so minus 18 for us. And then in the XFL, we had split there. We had the Roughnecks on Saturday, minus 6.5. That was a winner at plus $18 to the bankroll. And then the Battlehawks over 40.5. They scored 39 total. I think it was 36-3 or something like that, or 33-6, somewhere in that range. The Guardians couldn't score any points to get us over the hump. Minus $18 to the bankroll. And then we got cleaned out in the race in Las Vegas. Harvick, minus $9. Truex, minus $9. Amarola, minus $5. And Kurt Busch, minus $4. If you do the math, that is a net loss of $26 to the bankroll. And that reduces our bankroll to $503. And dividing by 30, as we always do, because we try to be selective sports bettors, that makes our bet size this week $17, down from $18. So a little bit of a step back, but overall, since the first of the year, we're moving in the right direction. So hopefully this will be the breakout year for us, calendar year, that is. So we'll see how that all goes. So today we're going to review some literature, and I'm going to hold up real close to the camera here. Can You Win? This is a book that I bought used for $3 on the online auction, one of the online auction sites that doesn't pay me to talk about them, so I'm not going to say their name. And the book's called Can You Win? The Real Odds for Casino Gambling, Sports Betting, and Lotteries. As it was written by Mike Orkin, Ph.D. In statistics from Cal Berkeley. The book was published in 1991 and covers most casino games. Now, for the purposes of the review, I'm only going to be talking about the sports betting section of the book. The book covers a lot of casino games. It also covers horse racing, which kind of falls into sports betting, but we're going to leave that separate. And it also has a chapter on what's called the prisoner's dilemma, and how that relates to game theory. And if you are a mathy kind of person, I don't know a better way to put that, a quantitative enthusiast, I think this is a good book for you overall. My opinion on the table games is any advantage that might be in this book, because it was written almost 30 years ago, is probably gone. The casinos have adjusted the rules to many of their games to eliminate any possible edges that people get. They don't like people winning on their games that are designed for them to win. Now, with sports betting, because there's money coming in on both sides of a game, and they're basically collecting their vig or their juice or their percentage, their cut of the bet. That's why we lay $110 down to win $100 on a point spread game. They cannot obviously eliminate all winners they can reduce the amount to allow you to bet. In some states, it's against the law to prevent somebody from placing a wager at a legal sports book. But they can limit you all the way down to $1 in some places. So if they think you're a winner and they want to reduce their risk to you as a customer, some sports books can reduce the wager they offer you. Now, some states have legislated, rules that are in favor to the sports bettor, and some states have legislated rules that are very in favor to the sports book. So, but because of the way the laws are set up, they can't completely eliminate good bettors from betting on sports, is what I'm trying to say. So sports betting gives you a better chance to win, in my opinion, than most of the other games that are out there. And let's talk a little bit about what it was said in this book as far as sports betting goes. So I'm going to start off by saying the sports betting chapter is probably like between 10 and 20 pages long. Great primer for the novice sports bettor with a good understanding of math. And he talks about, when I say primer, I mean primer. It's like, what is sports betting? What is what is a over-under? What is a point spread? What is a money line bet? What is a parlay? What is a teaser? And goes through those with good explanations in words, but also good explanations in mathematics. So I feel like it's a good primer overall. Now, the one big red X that this book gets, and it may have something to do with the time it was published, but I disagree with the authors, and I think most modern sports bettors would disagree with this. Author makes a faulty assumption that bookmakers are trying to even their action when that is rarely the case. Now, I always go back to the same example when I talk about, because it's such a clear-cut example in so many ways of a lot of the concepts I try to explain here, is the Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor boxing match that happened a few years ago. So in the book, the author explains that if a sports book takes the exact same amount of money on the Giants and the Cowboys, it will collect equal amount of vig from both sides, and it would pay out, and they were guaranteed profit. And that is totally true. In theory, that is totally true. But what sports books like to do is they like to try to maximize their profits. So they take positions on games because they can offer, number one, they can offer the line, and number two, they can move the line. So, if 3 points is the true spread statistically, if all the best models in the world agree that Cowboys are 3-point favorites over the Giants. Well, the sports book, depending on what position they want to take on that game, can offer a better spread to get move money in one direction or the other. Sometimes they want to take a lot of money on one side. And then going back to my example, the Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor fight, it was, for most people that follow those sports, it was ridiculous to think that Conor McGregor could win that fight. He was not a boxer. He was an MMA fighter. And Mayweather was probably the best fighter of his generation, undefeated, obviously the best fighter in his weight class. And the sports books took as much money as they possibly could on McGregor to win. And they were getting so much money, they actually lowered the odds for his payout. I think he closed at like plus 250 or plus 200, but he started at, plus 400 or whatever. And the sports books cleaned up on that fight because the odds they offered on Mayweather were horrible. So there was no incentive for a lot of experienced sports bettors to place money on him unless you did it real early. And they took tons and tons and tons of money because, number one, people looked at it and they said, oh, juicy payout, I want to get a few bucks on that. Or people bet because they like the guy. And but that's a prime example of the sports books taking a position on a sporting event. They wanted money on McGregor. They didn't try to even out the money because they would have to. They wanted to even out the money. They would have to offer better odds on Mayweather, and they didn't want to do that because they knew that he was very, very likely to win. So this is a very faulty point in the book, and it's probably the only blemish I can really give the author here as far as the sports betting section goes of this book. Sports books take a position on games all the time. If they think they can get a lot of money on one side of a game and they think it's the wrong side, they're going to take that risk because they can, they're laying 10 to win 11 all the time, and we're laying 11 to win 10 all the time. So they can afford to take more risks than us because they're getting the best of it, and we are not. So now moving on to something that the author did really well. This is probably one of the best chapters I've read. He spends about 2 or 3 pages talking about the Kelly criterion and Kelly betting. Now, I have not talked about this on the show because I consider this to be an advanced betting strategy, and it's only for people that have mastered bankroll management. And I'll explain why in a moment. But if you've heard of Kelly criterion or if you've heard of Kelly betting and you do not know what it is, maybe you might want to check this book out because he explains how it works. It's a mathematical formula for aggressive bankroll growth, and you adjust your bet size depending on the amount of edge you have on a wager. And then this is the caveat, and this is why I have not mentioned Kelly betting on the show before, is that you have to know mathematically how much an advantage or how much expected value you have on a wager, or you have to have a very tuned-in probability of winning a wager. You have to know what your percentage of winning that wager is to determine whether or not the odds are worth betting on. If you have no expected value in your wager, then you do not make a bet at all. You make a zero, you wager $0. So betting Kelly criterion is very dangerous for people that do not understand the math involved. And even some very experienced professional bettors I know will only bet half or a quarter of what the Kelly criterion tells them to bet, or maybe even less, depending on how safe they want to play it. So the methodology I use on the bankroll management methodology I use here on the show of being selective and only having 30 bets in your bankroll and only making about 5 bets a week on average is going to keep you from going broke. It's not designed to maximize your growth. When you can start growing your bankroll and you continue to exercise solid bankroll management and don't stray from the path, then you can go into Kelly criterion betting, and that is for people that are considering becoming professional bettors. And but if you're interested in learning about it, I recommend checking this chapter out in the book if you can find it somewhere. And the good anecdote from the book, both the beginning and the end of the sports betting chapter, is basically a famous quote from a sports bettor that all of my losses are bad luck, but all of my wins are skill. And I find that humorous because that's a lot of people who bet sports that don't take it as serious, which is fine because betting sports for entertainment, we've talked about that in a previous episode. There's nothing wrong with that. But for those of us that take it seriously as a hobby and we have a profit motive and we're trying to win some money, we know that bad things happen. We know that it's inevitable that we're going to make bad bets at some point. But yes, you can tell all your friends, if you like fishing stories and the like, that all your beats were bad luck and all of your wins were great skill and you saw it coming a mile away. overall, a good, cheap first step read for the newer sports bettor. If you are trying to get into sports betting and you want to learn about all the basic terminologies, this rings true pretty much, except for the part about the books balancing the action, because that rarely happens. This is a good, I think for $3, it's a good little primer. It's worth it. It was written about 1990, 91. A lot of the stuff in there is a little outdated. They have parlay cards and talks about prop bets and things, futures bets and all that kind of stuff. So if you're not older like myself, you might not, it might not connect with you. But if you remember the Super Bowls back from around then it'll make sense to you, I think. So I liked it. I cannot offer any opinion on all the other games because I don't play them. Some of them I don't even know all the good rules and concepts, so it would be foolish for me to try to review the rest of the book. But I liked this one a little bit better than the last book review I did, because instead of just giving bullet point advice, this actually goes in depth and explains examples, and a good light read if you're on an airplane or commuting or wherever you spend your reading time. So good job, Mike Orkin. And we'll have another book review soon. So when I come across the next example I want to show you, I'll bring it up. So let's move on to the weekend sports, and we're going to start with the NHL on Friday night. And we have the Minnesota Wild at the Blue Jackets. 5.5 is the total. The Wild have been playing great. Blue Jackets goaltending has been really suspect. If Elvis Merzlikins plays tonight, I really like the Wild here. The Wild had a very, very poor start to the season, and they've improved tremendously. A part of it is their forwards getting healthy, like Zach Parise. They traded Jason Zucker, but that doesn't seem to have affected their offense a whole lot. Of course, Jason Zucker ended up in Pittsburgh on the line with Sidney Crosby, so I'm sure he's happy about that trade. The Rangers at the Flyers. Flyers minus 164. 6 is the total here. This is a really good number on a division game. The Flyers are a better team overall, I think, but the Rangers have played really well, and I think this is going to be Georgiev against Carter Hart. Carter Hart is not really sparkled since he's come back from his injury. But it's tough because it's a good number on the underdog. But the Flyers, I think, are the better team here. I'm not sure if I like that game enough to bet it. The Avalanche at the Hurricanes, pretty evenly lined there. Over under 6. Avalanche is missing Rantanen. He's out, 6 weeks with a elbow or shoulder injury. Hurricanes have not had great goaltending, and they shored up their defense, and then their first game after the trade deadline, they got rocked pretty bad. So I kind of like the Avalanche here, but once again, there's not a lot of incentive to bet at that number. And then you got the Penguins on a West Coast road trip. They just lost to the LA Kings. Now they're facing the Ducks. Minus 190 on the Penguins, plus 169 on the Ducks. 6 is the total. This is one of those games where the Penguins could break out for 6 or 7 goals. You just don't know. They're playing back-to-back on a West Coast trip here. Don't really like the number. Don't really like the number here a lot. And then the Sabres, who have not been playing bad, but the problem is they don't have quality goaltending, at the Golden Knights, who have just been on fire. I would expect that maybe Robin Lehner, who they just picked up, might play tonight as a kind of a revenge game against his old team. There is no value in betting the spread here. Golden Knights are like minus 112 on the minus 1.5 goals. I could see this going over 6. I think that would probably be the best bet on this game is the over. And the Sabres can score, and the Golden Knights can definitely score. So that would be the game. That would be the number that I like the best there. So 5 games tonight. playoff push is starting. The teams that are out of the playoff mix have, sold off some of their better players. And one or two teams, I like the Islanders, made some good moves. We'll see how that works out for them. Teams that picked up speed or they filled a huge hole. Edmonton picked up some balance and some defense. I still question their goaltending, though. I really like Vancouver in the West. The West is kind of a crapshoot because there's no one strong team standing out. The East has 3 or 4 strong teams, so the odds are not very good on the futures. But in the West, there could be, if you want to bet on somebody to win the Stanley Cup, there could be some really good teams based on, just even if they get there to the final, you can hedge with the other team and make a profit. So we'll talk more about that down the road. So let's move on to some football and XFL Week 4. And we'll see if we can't pick a couple winners this week. Remember, there's only 8 teams. There's 4 games a week. There's 10 weeks in the season, and so we're almost halfway. The LA Wildcats at the New York Guardians. Guardians getting 8. 39 is the total. You got a team in the Guardians that can't score points, and you got a team in the Wildcats that up to last week couldn't stop anybody from scoring points, but they went out and crushed the DC Defenders like 27-3 or something crazy like that. So they got a new defensive coordinator, and they found something. Either they found some flaw in the DC game plan, or they finally got a decent, a defensive scheme together. I'm not sure. I can't rely on the Guardians to score any points. Otherwise, I would love to take this over, but I'm not going to touch it because the Guardians have had trouble scoring points 2 weeks in a row. I can't touch that game. Maybe if it was like 13, I think, anything over 10, I might be over it, all over it. So going to pass on that one. Then we got the Seattle Dragons at the Battlehawks. The Battlehawks are no longer the XFL secret anymore. They went from plus 10.5 in one game to minus 11.5 in the other. So, although this total of 38, I like that a lot. Against the Guardians, I had the total over 40, and they got 39. So I like the over 38 here because the Dragons are better offensively than the Guardians. So I feel like that's the thing to take. I've said before that I would take almost any XFL team at plus 14. I like the Dragons here at plus 11.5. The Battlehawks have not, except for last week against the Guardians, have not blown anybody else away. So I could see the Battlehawks winning by 10 here, but it's a lot of points. The interesting thing is one of the problems with the overs is that the conversion rates for the extra points, 1, 2, or 3 extra point conversions, super low. Lower than expected. And I'm hoping that changes. More scoring is better. These games, when they get lopsided, when it's 28-3, there's no onside kick in the XFL, and it makes the lopsided games super boring at the end. And the only thing you're hoping for is a score, to get an over, or not a score to get an under. And I end up turning the games off when they're out of reach. It's just because one team's trying to run off the clock and the other team's just trying to hurry up and throwing the ball all the time. So it gets a little stale. So big matchup this week, the Roughnecks at Houston at Dallas, the Renegades. I like the Renegades personnel and coach. I feel like +2 here is – I like Dallas to win this game at home. I don't know about the total, but there haven't been any one-point games, to my knowledge. There haven't been any one-point games in the XFL yet. So I don't see any point in taking the 2 points here. I would just take the money line if you like Dallas this week. So get yourself a little better payout. That's the thing about, there could be at some point there is going to be a 1-point game. I just don't. It's unlikely with everything's scored in 6s and 3s. 6-point touchdowns, 3-point field goals, and everybody's missing their conversions. So those numbers are becoming more and more relevant as the season goes on. And then we got the DC Defenders at the Vipers. Defenders looked awful last week, but they get a good matchup against Tampa Bay. And the Vipers finally scored some points last week, so they've finally made changes to their offense that has been able to allow them to score points in this league. 44 is a pretty low total, but since Tampa Bay is already has had trouble scoring 3 out of the 4 weeks, I think they've been like 12 points or less in the 3 out of the 4 weeks. Or 2 out of the 3 weeks. I can't take the over. I can't take the under. I like the Defenders minus 2.5 here, but it's probably a pass for me. That's just the side I like, but I don't think I would wager on it. So that's the week in the XFL, and I'll have my picks shortly. But before we do that, let's wrap up with some NASCAR. And this week's the Auto Club 400 in California. It's the California Speedway. It's a 2-mile oval. It's interesting if you look at the driver histories of this one course has some very interesting driver history that made it easy for me to make picks this week. So Martin Truex won both California races in 2019. So they race there twice a year. Kyle Busch won both California races in 2018. So you would have to think that they would both be favorites to compete for a win. Denny Hamlin, in the last 10 races, they raced there twice a year, so the last 5 years, 6th or better in 9 of the last 10 races, and the one he didn't, he finished 16th. Jimmy Johnson, 12th or better in his last 10 races in California. Now, this is Jimmy Johnson's from California. This is his last full-time year in NASCAR. I could see him competing. I don't know if he really has the Chevys have enough to compete with the Fords and the Toyotas. It comes down to engines as well as aerodynamics. Even though the cars are stock cars and they're all supposed to be similar, they have their own engine builders. And, Gibbs has their engines, Hendrick has their engines, Stewart, Haas, and Penske have their engines. And on these courses that don't have restrictor plates, which is 95% of the courses, some cars are just faster than others. So this is one of those courses, I think, where it's not really going to be a fuel mileage race, but there's not going to be a lot of cautions. And the faster cars will pull away and be able to get enough of a lead to stay in front. So we're going to wrap it up and give you my picks this week. And I'm going to take on Friday the Wild money line plus 113 over the Blue Jackets. They've just been playing super hockey. Then XFL on Saturday, we're going to take the Dragons and the Battlehawks over 38 at minus 108. Like I said, they scored 30. St. Louis scored 39 total last week with a really bad offensive team, so they should go over 38. And then I'm going to take the Dallas Renegades on Sunday money line at plus 111. Once again, watch them prove me wrong and get a 1-point loss instead of taking the plus 2. And then on Sunday, I'm also going to take Kyle Busch, who's won 2 races recently, Martin Truex at plus 800. For somebody who's done as well as this track, those are really great odds. And Denny Hamlin. Now, these are the odds at DraftKings. You need to shop around because the odds can vary wildly. One of the online sportsbooks I use has Denny Hamlin at plus 1,000, and DraftKings has him at plus 1,600. So it pays to shop around, but 16-1 on Denny Hamlin, who has very good record at this track, a lot of top fives. So 3 Gibbs cars. I'm going to put a half unit on each. Hopefully we'll get a winner, a little more boost to the bankroll. We'll see what happens. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for watching. We'll have another episode very soon, and we got Aussie Rules football starting soon. Next week we'll have the conference tournament starting in the NCAA basketball, and maybe we'll talk about that. But for now, I'm going to play the outro music. Everybody enjoy their weekend, and take care. See you next time.